This is a Fox News alert. Former NSA contractor Edward Snowden is on board a flight from Hong Kong to Russia right now. From there, it's unclear where he'll go, though there is much speculation. There are unconfirmed reports he will go from Moscow to Cuba and then to Venezuela, some say Iceland. What does the United States need to do to capture Snowden? What legal steps can the country take in order to do that? Elizabeth Foley is a professor of constitutional law at Florida International University, and she joins us now. Elizabeth, thanks a lot for joining us. What exactly can the U.S. government do to bring Snowden back?
Well, I guess it all depends on where he ultimately lands. They're obviously seeking extradition. They had already filed extradition papers with Hong Kong, but those papers weren't apparently in order, according to the Hong Kong authorities, so they let him leave the country. And then where he lands, it could make a difference, because the first question you ask in any extradition scenario is whether or not the United States has an extradition treaty with that particular country. When he lands in Russia, for example, the United States does not have an extradition treaty with Russia, so he may decide to stay there for a while.
What about airspace? Let's say he decides to fly to Cuba. That, of course, would bring him over a number of countries with which we have extradition treaties. Could the U.S. government force a landing and get him at the airport?
In theory, they could, but I seriously doubt the United States would use that show of force. It would be a very aggressive maneuver. The United States rarely takes that sort of action, so I'm not anticipating that that's going to come into play here.
What do you make of his departure from Hong Kong? Does it surprise you that the Chinese authorities allowed him to leave?
Surprise would be too strong of a word there. I think, given the tensions between the Chinese and the United States in recent years, and especially given Snowden's comments that the United States was spying on the Chinese, I think it was to be expected that they weren't exactly going to be trustworthy on holding him until such time as the legal process could play itself out. So I think he's been a flight risk all along, and I think the United States has known that.
Now, we're hearing reports he may be bound for Iceland. No way to confirm whether or not those are accurate, but a number of reports indicate that may be the case. If he does wind up in that country, in Iceland, can he be extradited? Is that a good call from his point of view, do you think?
Well, Iceland is one of the countries that we have an extradition treaty with. I've also heard rumors that he may be going to Ecuador, which, as you know, is where, we're harboring Julian Assange right now in the London embassy. We also have a treaty with Ecuador. If he ends up either in Iceland or in Ecuador, I think it's the same scenario, because in either place, he is likely to claim what's called a political offense exception to these extradition treaties, which basically means he's claiming that he's accused of a political offense in the United States, which espionage certainly is. And if those countries' courts believe that that is a political offense, then they won't extradite him.
And then he could be offered citizenship by either of those countries and just stay there?
Well, I don't know about citizenship, but certainly he'd be eligible for those countries' asylum.
Interesting. Are there fugitives, do you know, living in either one of those countries other than Assange?
I don't know off the top of my head. I wouldn't be surprised if there were refugees in Ecuador. I'm not quite sure about Iceland. I think the United States clearly has better diplomatic relations with Iceland than it does with Ecuador. So I think there's a possibility that the United States, after months or perhaps years of effort, could convince the Icelandic courts to, in fact, extradite him. But again, if they think that this is a political offense in the United States, which it probably is, they probably would not extradite him, even from Iceland.
Elizabeth Foley joining us this morning. Thanks very much for that insight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Tucker.